Let's go off the grid.
Okay.
Let's go off the grid.
Okay.
I know that you really want to put your phone away.
Yeah.
Let's go off the grid.
Hello, and welcome to Off the Grid, a podcast about how to run a creative online business without relying on social media or just totally burning yourself out in the process. I'm your host, Amelia Ruby, and on this show, I share stories, strategies, and experiments for sharing your work and making money online with radical generosity and energetic sovereignty. And today, we are talking about something that I have never gotten into on the show before, but is such an important part of our work for so many of us. And that topic is the home office. I think part of the reason I haven't talked about this before is because it's so obvious it's invisible to me in certain ways. Of course, if I work online and I work from home, then I have to have a place to work from. And when I think about it, I actually put a lot of intention into the space where I'm working. And in fact, I even did a whole home office renovation this summer because I wanted to turn one of the windows in my office into a door into my backyard so I could go straight from my desk to the garden and my tiny backyard pool in the summertime. And when I did that, I repainted, I refreshed, I hung a beautiful quilt behind my seat so that my Zoom background could be a lovely pattern. And as I was doing that, I was really happy to talk to today's guest, Taylor Apolonio of Habitat Interiors. Taylor is an expert in design psychology as well as an interior designer. And they're here to talk about how we all can sort of shift and refresh our work vibe by tending to our workspace. And I think that in the spirit of this Back to Biz Refresh series, I actually learned a lot from Taylor about how where we work can impact how we work and how we feel about the work that we're doing. So I'm incredibly grateful to have Taylor on the show. I'm so glad we're finally talking about workspaces and home offices. And I love that I get to bring you this Back to Biz Refresh series thanks to our sponsor, 9 to Kind Planners. So if you have not heard of 9 to Kind before, they create anti-perfectionist planners that help all of us get things done by leaning into possibility instead of perfectionism. The founder of the company, Lauren, is really wonderful. I had her on the show in the spring, and she has created some exclusive discounts for Off the Grid listeners. So while you're thinking about your workspace with today's episode, if you also want some support with planning, the 9 to Kind Possibilities Planner and Daily Notepad are two of my favorite planning tools. And I would love if you would head to the show notes to check them out and grab those discount codes from Lauren so that you can get your own and try out a new planning system as you refresh your workspace this summer and fall. Thanks again to Lauren for sponsoring this series and to Taylor for joining me in this episode. Let's dive in, shall we, to this conversation about how to refresh your home office and your whole work vibe. Hi, Taylor. Welcome to Off the Grid.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here and very excited for this conversation. So looking forward to it.
Yay, me too. So I want to dive right in with kind of a big picture question, but for a long time, I was a student who lived in a shitty apartment and I worked anywhere and everywhere. If my laptop was there, I could make it work. I worked on buses. I worked in very dark, weird library corners. I worked in public. I worked in bed. For a long time in my life, it was just laptop means I can work here. But over the past few years, I've really started to notice how I feel impacted by space. And as I moved into a new home and actually have a dedicated office here, I've realized that how my space is set up really does impact my ability to work. And then of course, as a podcaster now, it definitely impacts my ability to record because you cannot record a podcast on a city bus. That is horrifying. I mean, I guess subway takes is sort of like that, but that's a different thing. So all of that said, I want to ask you just why the design of our office matters. How does the space we're in impact our work?
I feel like it's a really big question. And coming from a psychology background, I could say like so many things like our cognitive function and our memory and like how our space affects us generally and how we like approach our day and our lives and our routines. And I think for home offices specifically, there's a lot to do with just, can you be productive in this space? Are you feeling some hindering effects from how you're physically set up as far as like your tech, like you're saying? So I think that there's a lot with the functionality of a space, but there's also a lot of subconscious things around like, oh, I have really great lighting in my office, so that makes me excited to be in this space. Whereas maybe if you're somewhere that's really dark and grungy, maybe it's kind of discouraging certain behaviors. So I think that's kind of the broad overview for me, is just like how you're coming into work and then how you're also able to function throughout the time that you're working.
I definitely do see these connections between my cognitive ability, my executive functioning, and the way that my space is set up. So I'm so curious, when you go into an office space to work with someone, are there a few key things that you're looking at? Like you mentioned lighting already. I'd be interested if there is like a sort of mental checklist I can get running of like, oh, I'm thinking about the lighting. I'm thinking about, I don't know, the desk, or like, what are some of your highlights of what's important in office design?
Yeah, I think part of it for me is knowing like what physical things am I wanting in the space. So if I'm like doing something really creative and I'm not trying to stay away from my laptop, I want to be able to sprawl out and like have notebooks everywhere and different things that I can grab and interact with. So just the physical amount of like desk space that I have would be something that I'm kind of considering, where maybe I'm just going to like a coffee shop and I just have my laptop and I don't need a lot of physical space. But I think being able to think through like what that's amount of space for your activity is a really important thing. But I also think, like we said, lighting is important. If I'm wanting to be in a creative headspace, I know that warmer lighting lends better to creativity, whereas cooler tone lighting is a lot more of just kind of task switching, kind of like administrative. Not that I personally love like cool light necessarily, but I kind of know the psychology behind warmer lighting helps me function better for those creative tasks. When I walk into an office space, I'm kind of also thinking of not like work from home situations. Like if I were to work in a physical office space right now, a lot of those like open concept floor plans are kind of something that's been in the zeitgeist for a little bit. And a lot of those open floor concepts don't lend super well to our modern day kind of like how we like to work, at least here in the US. We like to say that we're really collaborative, but honestly, I don't see that in like physical office settings very often. So I think a sense of privacy is really important for a lot of people, and that's why open concept spaces aren't necessarily very great for that, because we're hearing a lot of people, we can observe a lot of people. There's a psychological process called prospect and refuge that I think a lot about, which kind of refers to, if you imagine a restaurant, a lot of the times people are drawn to booth seating rather than other types of seating. And that's because we have the protection of the booth is covering our back. No one can sneak up on us, but we can also like look out and kind of see like, oh, I can observe what's happening in this space. So I kind of like to think about that when I'm working as well. Like, do I feel protected? And is what I'm working on currently needing a sense of privacy? And if so, like I want something more enclosed so I'm able to feel good about my work.
Oh, yeah, that's so interesting. And I'm just reflecting that when I first moved into this house, my office, I set up my desk so I could look out the door because I didn't want anyone to like come in. But then after we lived here for a few years, I flipped it and my back was to the door. And I think that just had to do with the fact that I like felt safe and it like was fine. And also I'm at home. But yeah, thinking about what I heard you say is in terms of things to start thinking through around our office space would be really emphasizing the activities that you're going to be doing in the space and then what do you need for those. And I like the example you gave of like if you want to be doing a lot of creative hands-on work and being on your laptop less, then you probably don't want to set up your space around, you know, like a 3-monitor situation that takes up the whole desk, which seems obvious when I say it that way, but also I right now have a laptop and a second monitor. It takes up this whole desk, which is actually a kitchen table from IKEA. And then if I'm sitting there being like, well, why haven't I actually made things lately? Well, my space isn't set up for that. And so it gets back to then the sort of like structural conditions. The built space that we're in actually impacts the activities we're going to tend to, or the orientations we'll have to our work. So I think there's a lot to be said for the role that your computer takes in your workspace will impact what gets done first or last in your orientation to your workday. I really like that emphasis on matching function to design or desired activities to design. And then you also mentioned lighting, that warm lighting can increase our creativity, whereas like cooler tones might increase our ability to do admin work. Which maybe is a hack I could try to use for myself. I'm like, how do I get like a blue light bulb in here when I need to like do my QuickBooks? Maybe I could play with that. I don't know. And then also thinking about, I love this framework of like prospect refuge, thinking about when do we need to have privacy or just feel more safe in our work? That's such an emotional need that I think it would definitely not occur to me to be thinking about when I'm thinking of my home office, but I think it does make a lot of sense. And so I'm loving this way of really orienting our office refresh around the activities we want to get done and the emotional states that we want to feel there. So that feels really holistic and supportive to me.
Thank you. I think that it's interesting how subconscious a lot of this can be. And I think that I'm really in tune with like how a space feels. Like I knew I never wanted to work in a medical setting because I was just like, just doesn't feel good to me. But I think that more and more people, when I talk about this, are like, oh yeah, I can see how that plays out in day to day.
So when we decided to have this conversation, one of the things that you wanted to do first was actually like reach out to the Off the Grid community and the interweb and the Clubhouse and do a survey of their design thoughts and needs and what's coming up for them with their office spaces. So I'm so curious, could you tell listeners a little bit about like the survey you did and some of the key takeaways that you found?
Yeah, definitely. The overall thing that I was looking for is just like, how are people feeling when they interact with their workspace? And I say workspace lightly. I know some people want to go work at the coffee shop sometimes, and sometimes there's a dedicated space that, yes, this is where I'm doing my work. And yeah, so I wanted to see kind of like how much people were feeling that it was supportive of their work, and also just like what sticky points they were feeling when it comes to their physical space. And yeah, I was just looking over this, and a lot of people have a dedicated home office space, which maybe is unsurprising since a lot of these folks work for themselves. But that was about 2/3 of folks. But the thing that I thought was really interesting was 50% of responders said that their space is functional but could feel better. So good that it's functioning in a, way that's supportive for them. But I think that we undervalue sometimes how much feeling good in a space can help us do things like work. So I was curious to hear more about what are we feeling. And a lot of like really tender things came up in some of the short responses. Like there was someone who was talking about they have like a grief archive in the closet of their home office, and how they really want to spend time with their cat when they're working, but it doesn't feel like it's supportive of that. And these different things that like we don't talk about when it comes to space, but like there's different things that we can do to make those experiences feel better. There was one person who even said something to the effect of, I have a lovely office space, but there was a lot of hard work that I had to do in that space. And so I honestly avoid even returning to it to do my work. And I just found this like so fascinating. And so the main thing I wanted to see was what were those kind of mental barriers that folks are having, and what were some of the physical barriers. And a lot of the physical barriers were kind of around like, I want a comfier chair, or my tech setup could be better, or my space is just generally too small or too cluttered. So there's kind of like a overview of some of the things that I was pulling from.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And again, I think it really shows this sort of meeting of functional needs and emotional needs in our spaces, and especially a workspace at home where like you spend a lot of time in your home office if you're like me. Maybe some people don't, but I work here every day. I spend a lot of time in this space, and I still will spend years not making it suit me. Like, I didn't get a second monitor until like year 4 of Softer Sounds, which is wild considering all I do is edit audio all day, which really benefits from a bigger screen. But I just didn't do it. It didn't occur to me I could. I just like didn't make that happen for myself. I also loved the example of wanting to spend time with the cat during the workday, but not knowing how to make that work. I literally just put an extra chair in my office so my cat could sleep there during the day. And I'm trying to convince her that this is her chair instead of right on top of my keyboard is the place for her to nap, which is where she prefers to nap. But just thinking about the ways that we can also like invite our beloved, pets and other creatures in the room, or if you have kids at home, like, is there a space in your office that's actually more for them so that you can try to coexist in that space, which is its own challenge, right? And so really thinking through, again, the functional needs as well as the emotional needs. And I also can relate to that sense of like doing really hard things in your office and then not wanting to go back there, even if it's a beautiful space. I recently redesigned my office, and that had been planned for a while, but it ended up coinciding with the death of my really beloved dog who spent every day next to me at work. And I needed to change the office to like clear the energy of that grief. In the weeks after she passed, I didn't want to come in this room at all. And I was working on the couch and working from bed and going to like I was avoiding the space, which I think is fine. I don't have a judgment of that, but reorganizing it, redesigning it, and making it feel very different is a way I was able to like re-enter the room again without, immediately starting to tear up, which is where I was at right after her death. So yeah, just really holding all of the like tenderness that comes up when we ask these questions.
Yeah, and acoustical needs as well. Like you've mentioned, you having to do audio editing. And that also came up a lot in the survey, actually, that I was a little bit surprised about. Maybe more people podcast in this space than I realized, which is totally probable.
That's my influence.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we kind of like demand of our space, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that there's also a lot that we demand of ourselves within space as well. So it's just kind of an interesting thing to hold.
Yeah. And this is also reminding me that when I was redoing my office, I thought a lot about my Zoom background. I was like, what's going to be behind me on Zoom? Because I am not someone, like, I don't like to blur the effect because it's really disorienting to me when I like move through that. So I really thought, and I even like what you can see, but listeners can't. I hung this big quilt behind me, and I was like very intentional in terms of what it would look like. And then also that has great acoustic effects for me as well as I'm recording here, and the quilt on the wall reduces the echo. And so we have personal functional needs for our work. We have personal emotional needs for our space. And then also we have these sort of aesthetic needs that like are the expectations of how we're going to show up, not just in our office, but like, especially if you're someone who is on Zoom or doing a lot of calls or doing a lot of recording, you're going to have very clear like visual and audio needs as well. And considering those is a piece of thinking about how to refresh and redesign your office. So, Taylor, I am curious for anyone who's listening to this and is feeling sort of like, okay, yeah, Amelia and Taylor, I don't really like my office. What do I do now? Like, what do they do? Like, if you can open up and realize like, okay, my workspace is not totally working for me, what do you do next?
The first thing that I would say is your space is probably the issue and it's not you. I think that a lot of times we think like we're the issue, like we can't function appropriately in this space. And I want to like shift the blame to like, let's put that on the environment and let's manipulate the environment. So how can we introduce these supportive layers, right? So one thing that I would, as an exercise, go through with folks is just when have you felt really good or when have you gotten to that state of flow in a space? It doesn't have to be this space, but generally speaking, like if you found it at a coffee shop, if you found it when you had a 9 to 5 in whatever office space, Can you go back to a time where that felt really supportive for you? Have that clear vision, and what elements could we potentially pick up from that? So maybe the acoustics were really good, like something we were talking about, and that's not something that's currently in your space. So for some like acoustic manipulation type things, we could introduce something like, I'm really into cork right now because cork is awesome for acoustics. So maybe we need a huge cork board somewhere in your office. And then that also kind of helps with some of the visual clutter because we can pin up all those random pieces of paper that we have. So maybe it's helping with the aesthetics and it's helping with the acoustics. Like a lot of people ask about like, well, what's the comfiest chair that I could get? Which I totally agree. Like comfort is a great thing. And I also want to like push back on people a little bit and be like, do we want to be sitting in our chair for 3 hours straight? Actually, like maybe we don't need the most comfy chair. And that can be a signal for us to like, oh, I want to get up and move my body actually. So I think envisioning what is somewhere that I felt good and what can I identify about that space that was good. And let's see how we can bring that into the space that you currently have.
Yeah, I like this practice of reflecting on what has felt good in space. And if you're listening to this and you're still like, I don't know, then I think it's an invitation to try different things out. Like spend a day working at a cafe, spend a day working from your couch, spend a day like working in your office at one angle and then flip your desk around and work the other way, letting it be experimental and enjoying that and letting yourself rub up against the things you don't like as well, right? I think that that's always really important for me to get clear on, like I didn't like working on the bus. That was very clearly distracting and challenging. And it only happened when I had like a cross Chicago commute for a while and I needed to get things done. But there are certain things that like will become clear. The first time you try to like podcast from a coffee shop, you'll be like, well, that doesn't work. Which, plenty of people have called into my shows from coffee shops and I have to be like, I'm sorry, I cannot do an interview in public to be recorded for a podcast, right? So just learning those things and not being afraid to like get into a space and try to do something and be like, oh, I don't like this. Or for instance, I have a really good friend who almost exclusively works from cafes and coffee shops. It works so well for her. And this is sort of a thing in human design, like whether your energy works best when you're like surrounded by other people or not. That is one of the things that, that can talk about. And for her, she needs like to pull the energy from the other people in the room to stay focused, to get things done. And she's like regularly taking calls in coffee shops. Me personally, I would rather never work again than have to do a Zoom in public. Like I hate taking calls in public. I don't like, it's so distracting to me to have other people around. I'm so panicked about the internet and if it's going to hold. I can't do it, but it like doesn't bother her at all. And she loves it and it works for her so well. And so it's an interesting, like I spent so much time designing my home office space, but she's spent a lot of time identifying cafes in every part of the city that she lives in that she could work from. Like because they need to have all these different qualities. They need to have a certain degree of sound and quiet. They need to have space. They need to be comfortable. They need to invite people to work from them, And so her set of needs and space is all about the public spaces that she's in. Mine is all about like creating this private space in my home. And both of those can get like a workspace refresh in different ways. And also some of her space needs come in like the work bag that she packs that has all of like the headphones, the chargers, the everything else that she has set up so she can take it anywhere she's going to work. Whereas for me, a lot of my space needs and effort has been put into getting my desk set up in a way that is easy to plug in and unplug things, since I'm often like have 6 different adapters and power and mics and things going on. So I just share that to say that like we want to encourage folks to find where you like to work and wherever that may be, find ways to make it align with your functional needs and your personal emotional needs. And also just shout out to working from the library. I just want to say, for folks here who like, you don't have space for an office in your home, and also you can't go to a cafe every day because it's expensive. Like I used to work from libraries a lot when I was a student at a university library or in a public library. And sometimes they have their own sets of needs, but shout out to every library that has like a random corner desk that I could just like tuck into and put my headphones on and blast music and work surrounded by books, which felt like my friends. I want to say that too. Like even if you don't have money or space to work with in refreshing your workspace, you can still find ways to work in spaces and make those spaces work for you. So just wanted to pop that in too.
Yeah, definitely. And if we wanted to go down into like more practical tips, I'm happy to. I also made like a worksheet of both acoustically and visually and a little bit of scent as well, like smell things that y'all can get access to. And I can give Amelia a link to and everything that's like very specific recommendations.
Oh, that sounds super rad. Can you say more? Like, give us some tips, Taylor. We need them.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll do a few more acoustic ones because I think that those are really interesting. But yeah, like Amelia talked about hanging something on the wall, like, and she chose a fabric option, which is fantastic. So differentiating materials is really important. So upholstered furniture, a big rug. If you already have a big rug and you're still like finding that you need acoustical support, a really thick rug pad underneath your rug will even enhance it further. I talked about cork elements, but you could also do like pegboards because they have little holes, so they kind of like bounce sound differently. This is maybe a step closer to like renovation, but a lot of like modern apartments and homes don't have solid core doors. I think your house might, Amelia, because you have beautiful old full wood doors, it looks like.
Yeah, my house is 100 years old and we have the original doors. So it does. But I just put a new door in my office that is kind of cheap and I can tell. So
Yeah.
yeah, it just depends on the space for sure.
But also like draft blockers, like if you're in an enclosed space and you're worried about some sound that's coming from the next room, draft blockers are also great. They can be hard to find like cute ones, but Etsy I'm sure has like a great array of them. So yeah, those are some like acoustic things. Also, plants can be really good because real plants, I should say, soil from like the plants itself, that can be really helpful in absorbing some sound as well.
Oh, I like that. Plants. I should put plants in my office right now. I have this ever-growing collection of spider plants. I have dozens of them. And right now they're just like all huddled in the front of my house on one table, waiting to go outside for the summer. But I could definitely put some in here. There's plenty of light for them in this space. Okay, so those are our acoustic tips. Could you talk a little bit about visual tips? I feel like the visual of an office, especially in our like visually oriented world, and designers are just like posting these like dream spaces on the internet and you get on Pinterest or you get on social media and you're like, wow, that office looks amazing. And mine does not look like that. So I'm curious about some visual tips.
I think one thing that I got a lot from the survey was like clutter. Like I have things everywhere. How can I organize them or not having to keep reorganizing these things? And I think one thing that this kind of points to for me is like, okay, where is like the storage in this space would be kind of my first question. So do we have some sort of shelving unit or do we have a closet or where can we put things? But if you need really easy access to items and you don't want to like throw them in a closet, some things that I would say like the corkboard I think is like a fun way, or a pegboard, but also like a wall mounted like magazine rack. Like if you just have some like random pieces of paper that you're like, yeah, I think I'm going to need these soon, and you want close by, throw up a magazine holder or something that just stays on your wall right there and have that be like your dump zone of, okay, that's where those things are going. So I know that I have easy access to them, but they're contained somewhere so it doesn't feel chaotic.
Yeah, I really like these invitations to get the stuff off the desk and clear the chaos, because I have to admit, like if I look at my desk right now, this is vulnerable, but I'll tell listeners what's on it. So we have we have my laptop on a stand. We have my second monitor. We have my mic and my recording device and all of that. That all has to stay here. I also have a separate keyboard and mouse pad to try to have a more ergonomic situation. But then I have a water bottle, I have a coffee cup, I have a giant thing of trail mix. So, still things that I want nearby. But then I randomly have a hammer and I have a postcard that someone sent me 2 years ago that's just sitting here because I found it recently. I was like, what do I do with this? I have 3 different hair clips. I have some cords that I don't know what they go to. I have a big stack of papers from the winter, like from a cohort I ran 6 months ago that's still sitting here. And then I have like my normal cup of pens and pencils and things. So when I look at this, it's like, okay, some of this does not need to be here. That's pretty clear to me immediately. It could go elsewhere. It could go in a magazine rack or just straight up in the recycling bin. And then some of this, it's like, I could think a little more about like, where do all the beverages go? I feel like for me, I always have this big desk because I said it is a table, but I always end up working really cramped in like one little part of it. And I don't know why I just keep accumulating objects. So I feel like what I maybe need is a different dump zone. Like I need somewhere else that these things go in my office, whether that be a box or a shelf, so that not everything just gets dumped on the desk all the time.
Yeah, I always have my water sitting here. I'm like, would I want to put that in a different place? And if so, like, what can I do? So I might have to chew on that one and be like, interesting.
Yeah, I feel like things like water, I'm like, that's fine. I often regularly have multiple coffee cups from previous days. There's like, I'm trying to get clearer with asking myself, what do I actually need within reach while I work? And what has just landed on my desk because it's a like medium priority object that doesn't really have an immediate purpose. That happens a lot to me, right? It's like the things I need as I'm working are like the high priority objects, like my water, like a pen to write something with, like my mic when I'm recording. And then there's like all this other stuff where I'm like, oh, well, it would be nice to have these like 3 different notebooks because I put different notes in each one. But they are just as easily grabbable from like the shelf to my left where I can just like stand up and grab them. Like they don't all have to be sitting right next to my computer all the time. And maybe they do for some people, but I'm really just trying to get better at asking myself like what really needs to be here. And sometimes this gets to your point about the chairs earlier. Like sometimes I try to put like every possible object I could need on my desk at the beginning of the day. But what ends up happening is that I just don't stand up for 6 hours. And like, that's not helpful either. I actually think I could benefit from putting some things just slightly farther out of reach, such that I then have to like get up and stretch and go grab them instead of just like staying in my seat. I'm definitely realizing how much of my desk setup specifically has been designed to help me stay in my seat all day, which is like not helping my body at all.
Yeah, I think that this is really important because I think that it's easy to get into that like hyper productivity mode. And so like, yes, we want everything at an arm's length away, right? And I think that that's good. And I think it also isn't good for us. And I want to encourage people like, okay, what are the systems I'm already using? If I have 3 different notebooks for 3 different reasons, how can I use that 3 system, but maybe massage it a bit so it's a little more contained and also easy for me to switch between what things I'm trying to work on. So if this is like long-term planning, this week planning, and past planning or something, let's say, and having like, 3 different drop zones or designated bins or whatever the system is to help me go through my workday and be like, okay, now I can mentally shift from this thing to the next thing, and my space reflects that shift, and maybe that helps me tap into what I'm trying to get done for the day.
I previously had 2 desks in my office, and one was for like quilting and creating, and one was for work. And that worked quite well for a while, like especially if I was in the middle of the quilting project, because it was a huge problem for me to have to like clear off my entire desk to then work on the quilting stuff and then clear it off again to be able to like do my work the next day. And like that transition just stalled me out constantly. And so having like 2 spaces was really helpful. Now in my new office setup, that is not the case. I have put a door where the old desk used to be. So I will not have 2 spaces here. And I'm trying to figure out like where is the other space in my house then for the more creative activities. And what's really coming up for me there too is I think that desk with all of my quilting stuff is just going to go in our like quasi dining room, and we're just not going to have like a dining space for a while. And we don't typically eat at our dining table anyway, but I have all of this like stress from like the socialized pressure of like, well, I can't just get rid of that table or just turn it into my quilting table. You have to have like a dining table in your house, especially because you can see it from my front door when you come in. So I'm like, I know that my mother will come in and be like, where's your table? Why is it covered in fabric? And the more that I redesign my space to suit myself, like along that journey, I have to confront all of these voices that are in my head around like what a house should look like, how clean it should be, what each room should contain. And it's definitely been a journey to confront those voices and reclaim my space as my own. I'm curious if that comes up for you or with your clients when you're redesigning space as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that post-pandemic, a lot of people are wanting to tap into like, do I actually use this space and how do I make it something that I use more frequently? And I think that there is one like, yes, everything's supposed to be clean and we want it to be picture perfect that a lot of people are confronting. And I don't know how I feel about this one because part of me is like, yes, when things are fresh and maybe not minimal, but clean, tidy, it helps support a lot of executive functioning things in our brain or encourage us to do certain things. So I think that there is a piece of validity here. And the other portion of my brain goes to like, well, maybe what is the purpose for the space looking a certain way? Like, is it because it makes me feel better, or is it because I don't want it to make other people uncomfortable if it's not clean? So I think that there's something interesting there to kind of look at. Going back to kind of, we demand a lot of our spaces, and I think that office spaces specifically can be very multifunctional, like what yours was for you. And this office space, both me and my partner work from it half of the week. We have his whole like musical setup is like the space that friends and family will sleep in if we have people in town. So there's a lot of rearranging. It's not a very big space. It's maybe 10 by 10. So it's like, what barriers are in place for us day to day and what barriers are maybe not day to day, but we're willing to sacrifice having it be really annoying to set up for guests because it doesn't happen all that often. And it's also worth trying to like host them and have them share the space with us.
Yeah, I definitely remember this about apartment life, which is that like having a dedicated guest room. I mean, in my 20s, my friends who had guest rooms, I was like, oh, you've made it. You're wealthy. You have a space that you'd never use until someone comes to visit you. Like, what is that about? Because, I lived in a studio for a long time. So people would come visit me and we would all be in the same room. And like my parents would come visit and they would sleep in my bed and I would sleep on this like sad little fold out futon that I had that was definitely from IKEA. And like that was just how it worked. We all shared the one room. And so like I did that for years. And then when I moved in with my partner in Chicago, we had a 2-bedroom apartment. So it was like we had a bedroom and an office. And then that office would become the guest room with the futon when people came to visit. And it is challenging to just have spaces, as you said, we demand a lot of. They have, in your office space, like 3 distinct needs that are very different. And so what do we do with that? And what's coming up for me is just thinking about the scale. It's like there are all these little micro things that we can do to love how we work and where we work. And maybe you don't have the luxury of a full office, but you have a desk. And like your desk can be the workspace and you can put storage under it and you can put things on the wall behind it and like make this your own space. Or maybe you just have your laptop. And this is where, a bit outside the scope of this conversation, but I think a lot about how my computer is set up, how my files are set up, how my Notion is designed. That really does facilitate my work in a really important way. And so that's another piece of it. If you can't work with physical space, you can hopefully work with some digital space and apply some of these similar principles, right? And, the final note I'm really just thinking about as we move toward wrapping up is really just about ritualizing space. We want to tend to the space and design it for functionality and emotionality and aesthetic, all the things that have come up today. But also how we enter the space with our bodies and the things we do there impacts that. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how you show up to work each day or like the way you interact with your office and how that can maybe be refreshed for the season ahead.
When I'm working with a client, my whole goal and dream is to create experiences in office, home, wherever that encourage connection to people or to your routines, your hobbies, what have you, that bring you joy, right? Like that's my whole goal is how can we manipulate the environment so we can get more joy? maybe spend less time in front of our screens and that temptation, etc. And so when I think about that for like me personally, as I walk into my office space, it's definitely like a work in progress. Most people in the construction interior design industry will say like our space is the last to be thought of because we're so focused on everyone else's. But yeah, I think that one thing that I want to practice is getting a routine and a ritual in of like, okay, I step into the space and maybe I just need to do like a room scan, like a body scan. Like, okay, is this going to work for me today? Is this going to be set up in a way that is supportive for the task that I'm looking to do today? Is there enough desk space? Is there construction outside of my window so I need to wear headphones today and I have those easily accessible? Like, what are the elements at play here? And I think both doing that at the beginning of the day and kind of at the end of the day of like, okay, let me check in. Like, how did I feel throughout my working day? And what may I want to manipulate in preparation for tomorrow? Or what do I want to take note of like, this didn't feel great, and maybe there's something that I can find, a little nugget here that I can explore in the next week or two that would optimize something of how I'm approaching my work or how I'm feeling when I'm working. So that's kind of the routine that I've been kind of hoping to get into a little bit more as I approach my space.
Yeah, I really like this sort of sensory application, like body scan as a room scan, like both together. I think it's really nice as you enter your workspace, like asking how your body feels and then going through the senses of like sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, I guess, also for the day and like what is there. I think that I could definitely benefit from doing a lot less like crash landing at my desk, like logging on 2 minutes before my first call of the day, or like also at the end of the day, I would benefit from not just like piecing out and leaving all the coffee cups there. Like often I will come into the office and be like, what was I doing yesterday? Why is this desk such a mess? Like, why is there a hammer on my desk? No one knows. I don't know. So no one knows. Like things like that I think I would benefit from just a little more intentionality. And I love this idea of like a body scan for that and just sort of doing some self-tending. And often for me, some like space decluttering before I get to work would probably really benefit both my like cognitive functioning, executive functioning, and general enjoyment of my space. So I feel like that's a beautiful place for us to wrap this conversation. Thank you so much, Taylor, for joining me for this. Thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in. If you do an office refresh, let Taylor know, let me know. We'd love to see it or hear about it. And for now, I'm going to go clean off my desk. But until next time, you can find us off the grid and in the clubhouse.
I kinda hate social media, feeds on my brain like a bacteria. If you read my Wikipedia, it'll say I kinda hate social media. Post a picture of myself, sacrifice my mental health, use your product time to sell. I would rather go to hell. Do you like this? Leave a comment. Can you share this? Will you wear this? Do you like this? Leave a comment. Can you share this? Will you wear this? Okay.
That was an abridged version of Social Media by Surfer Boy and Rectangle. To hear the entire song, find Surfer Boy on Spotify or head to the link in the show notes. Thanks so much to them for sharing the song with us, as well as to Melissa Caitlin Carter, who sings our theme song that you hear at the start of every show. I'm your host, Amelia Fruby, and if you enjoyed this episode, I hope you will download the free Leaving Social Media Toolkit at offthegrid.fun/toolkit. Until next time, I will see you off the grid.